This episode of Dorking Out is brought to you by
the Carillion Engineering Corporation and its new YT-1300 freighter. She may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts.
And
the numbers 1 and 3. You might want to Google it now so Wolf Blitzer won't have to explain it to you in 6 months.
Houston, flight is go.
Myla, let's go.
From Assignment X, Amalgamated Storytelling, and thesoniashow.com, it's Dorking Out with Sonia Mansfield and Christopher Allen Smith.
Welcome to episode 30 of Dorking Out, the podcast for people who like to dork out about stories and the stories and pop culture that we love. That means movies and TV, books and podcasts, and everywhere else you find stories that interest you. This is the Shotgun of Reviews edition, because holy smokes, we are talking about a lot of different things tonight. With me today is my co-host, professional writer and author of The Sonia Show, Sonia Mansfield.
Hey there. Are you going to say hi to me?
Oh, yes. Sorry. I am, because I was typing. I apologize, but now I'm done typing. Hi, Sonia. How are you?
Hi.
Hey,
With me today is my co-host, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, and someone who never listens to me, and author of the upcoming Jet Juergens and the Affinity Key, Christopher Allen Smith.
That's right. It's Jet Juergens and the Affinity Key. I don't have affinity right now with my co-host because she's mad
look
at me.
who decided to all of a sudden listen to me when I was talking about the title of his book.
I feel like I could justify that. Yes, I know. I'm sorry. Wow. All right.
Anyway,
so, you know what?
This week's episode, we are introducing a new segment called We Like to Watch, in which we review a slew of movies and TV shows, including Live by Night, Hidden Figures, Fences, and The Young Pope. Then, in our reoccurring segment, You're Dead to Me, we share the stories in pop culture that we loathe. I'm looking at you, Breakfast at Tiffany's. All of that, plus our favorite headlines of the week. We've got a lot to dork out about, so let's get this podcast started.
What? This is the snake bit edition of Dorking Out. Want more Dorking Out? Well, there's a few simple things you can do. First, go to iTunes and give us your 5-star rating and review. This helps us find new listeners. Next, be a good friend and share like your mommy told you to. Simply go to dorkingoutshow.com and you'll find some links to our show, which you can post to your Facebook, Twitter, or wherever fine social media links are shared. It's an easy way to impress your friends and make your enemies green with envy. Which is really the point of social media anyway, isn't it? After all, listening to any of the Dorking Out shows means that you're a modern trendsetter. We know, because if audience research has shown anything, it's that the Dorking Out show audience is smarter, more attractive, and less susceptible to baseless flattery than any other audience in the podcasting world. That means that you're the best. It's right here, in the data, which is totally real and not made up in any way. So share our show. You can talk about it with your friends, and we can get new listeners, which means you get more shows. It's the circle of life modified to include podcasting. Point is, please rate us on iTunes and tell your friends. Now, back to the show. That brings us to topic 1. We like to watch, and we like naughty puns in our topic titles.
Yes, this was a potential title for our podcast originally.
That's right. Oh, that's right. It was going to be a very naughty title, which I still think is funny. But the thing is, in movies and television, so Sonia and I talk a lot about, wow, there's so many things coming out on TV. How do you even know where to look? Then in December the movie studios are cramming out so many movies that they hope are going to be Oscar contenders that they're just flying out the door. So there's so many things to watch in December that it essentially becomes impossible. And they spill
Yes.
into January. So we've been seeing a lot of stuff, but because of A, so much to see, B, because we don't want Dorking Out to be completely filled up with just reviews of TV and movies, we kind of have not been talking a lot about all of them on the show. But we figured out, you know what? We want to give some guidance to our friends and listeners and some idea of kind of what we're going through. So, Sonia.
Yes.
So we're just going to go through a lot of stuff. We're going to go through Patriots Day, Fences, I'm sorry. Hidden Figures, Taboo, Tom Hardy, Young Pope, Jude Law. You're going to talk about...
Oh, you want me to list them? I'm going to talk
sorry.
about The Hunt for the Wilder People.
Right.
And also Hidden Figures. And the Netflix series Hip Hop Evolution.
Now, here's me being an ignorant white man.
Yes.
Hip Hop Evolution.
Would you like me to start with that one?
No.
Okay.
Hip Hop Evolution. Well, maybe. I don't know. Hip Hop Evolution, is that like Ken Burns' jazz, but just like updated? Or is that like a fictional show?
It is a documentary series.
Hey, look at that. All right.
So good guess.
Look at me. Look at the big brain on Brad.
Yeah.
All right. Sonia.
Why don't we start with that one since you brought it up at all?
Let's hit it.
So it's a documentary series. I think it's about 6 parts, maybe 4. I can't remember. Anyway, the documentary series about the history of hip hop. And it's kind of like a perfect companion piece to Netflix The Get Down, which I've also reviewed on our show, which was kind of like a fictional, like what happened, the birth of hip hop. The Hip Hop Evolution is actually a documentary about the birth of hip hop. So I love old school hip hop. So this documentary series is my jam. It talks about hip hop originators like Grandmaster Flash and DJ Kool Herc and Africa Bambaataa and more. And they all talk about the origins of hip hop. Spoiler alert, hip hop was always political. It's really good stuff. I think you could watch the series, then you'll just download all the music and you'll be happy you did. And I'm really hoping there's going to be a season 2 because this segment, these like 4 episodes go from like the beginning to about like gangster rap. So it's like,
okay.
From the birth of hip hop to about Dr. Dre,
Okay.
I think there's more stories to tell, and I would love to see some episodes that kind of explore women's roles in hip hop, but it's a really good miniseries and you could get through them super fast.
Cool.
I know it's not your thing, but
here's the thing.
Other people will like it.
Well, that's the thing is I might like it because I do like documentaries on the development of things, even if I don't want to be involved in those things.
Right.
Like Ken Burns jazz. I'm not a huge jazz guy. There are parts of it that I like. I like, the big band jazz, I guess, of the early ages or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just jazz has gone in a direction that I'm just not interested in. But I loved his series. Baseball. Not a huge baseball fan. I like to go to the park and watch some baseball, but I'm not like following a team. But Ken Burns, baseball, watched all 10 innings of it. Love it. So I think
there's some really interesting stuff in here about it's so funny how all right, so there was a big riot in the Bronx in the 70s. And when that happened, all of these people broke into electronic stores and they stole stereo equipment and speakers and things like that. And it's almost like that's how hip hop got so popular because of the riots. Everyone was able to get their hands on this really expensive equipment and work on their music.
That is interesting.
What if that had never happened? It's so interesting. There's a lot of really cool, weird stories like that.
Now, I'm going to be a wise ass right here, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but it was the 70s, so I'm sure it just would have been delayed by 6 months.
Probably.
There's riots all the time,
Right.
everywhere. I'm sure we would be getting Kanye's new album 4 months from now instead of, what was it, 2 weeks ago or something?
Right.
A month ago? I don't know. Anyway, that's cool. That's interesting. Actually, who are the guy who did this?
You know what? I don't remember the name of the person, so I'm going to look it up right now.
All right. And while you do that, I am going to save our audience time and talk about Ben Affleck's Live by Night, based on a novel by Dennis Lehane, who wrote Gone Baby Gone, Ben Affleck's first movie, which was fantastic, starring Casey Affleck. Live by Night is kind of a 1920s, 1930s gangster movie centered on Joey Coughlin, played by Ben Affleck, as he kind of navigates through the crime world of Boston and then Florida. And I went to see it today with my wife. It's fine. It's all right. It's got a 31 on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't think it deserves to be that low, but it's definitely Affleck's first misfire. It's got about 4 different stories, all of which I found were pretty interesting, but unfortunately they didn't quite gel, and the end of the movie just, I've said this a million times and I believe it more and more every time I see a movie like this, is if you can't stick the landing, if the ending of the movie is just meh, everything before it just pales in comparison, and it's got there are interesting moments in it where there's, at a certain point, it's got what it looks like gangsters versus the Klan, which is interesting, because the Klan were, anti-Catholic and, the gangsters had all these clubs where everybody was able to mingle. There was no segregation. It was run by a bunch of Italian and Irish Catholics. So the Klan was just not thrilled on any level. So there was this kind of war between the Klan and the gangsters, which was fun, but then that kind of got dropped.
Just fun.
Well, it is. That's an interesting thing. It's just, it's always fun to watch, James Bond beat up on bad guys, but, watching Darth Vader and Voldemort go at it, that's the movie you want to see.
Right.
Anyway.
So this movie is not critically acclaimed. Is this giving people permission to beat up on Ben Affleck again?
It might, but that's the thing is the way the kind of gossip industrial complex just decides that they're going to kick someone around for 6 months or a year or 5 years like they did with him. I don't know. It's just like, why? I was thinking about this. The thing that irritates me about the internet in modern times is what used to irritate me about gossip magazines 10, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, which is they're just making snarky, easy potshot comments, hackneyed jokes. And it's just, yeah, they could beat up on him, I guess, but I don't know. The guy, he's done 3 solid movies in a row. Then he has kind of a stumble. I mean, this is not an
and then everyone's
movie.
Like, get him.
Exactly. It's I hope they don't. People, there's not a director out there that hasn't stumbled. They have good runs, but everybody eventually puts out something that just doesn't work. This one is kind of an admirable failure. It is a gorgeous movie. But yeah, so I'd say 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10. So actually, I forgot to ask, what would you give Hip Hop Evolution?
Oh, I say it's a 7.
All right. So
it's good.
Who did it?
It's hosted by and created by someone named Shadrach Cabango. He's I believe a Canadian rapper.
Does he come from the German Cabangos?
I don't think so, and I don't know what that is.
He comes from the House of Cabangos.
I'll take your word for it. They
ruled Austria until the fall of the empires. Then they had to move to the New World. Start rapping. All right. My understanding of history might not be accurate. Anyway, what is your next movie? I think is Hunt for the Wilder People.
Yes, which is based on the book called Wild Pork and Watercress by Barry Crump. I've never read the book, but it's adapted for the screen and directed by Tika Waititi. I think that's how you pronounce it. He did one of my favorite comedies of 2014, What We Do in the Shadows.
Boy,
did you see that?
I didn't, but my cousin Ryan, who is a friend of the show, has been telling me for years to watch that movie, and I have to see it.
Really, really funny.
All right, I'm going to do it.
I really loved Hunt for the Wilder People. It's about a boy who goes to stay with a foster family, and then him and his foster father kind of become the subjects of a manhunt when they get stranded in the wilderness in New Zealand.
Right.
It is this close to being a Wes Anderson movie. And I mean that as a compliment because I love Wes Anderson movies. It's very quirky and, I'm fine with that. I thought it was very funny when it needed to be and very touching and emotional when it needed to be. I really, really liked this movie. I thought it was really good. Did you see this one too?
I saw about half of it.
Okay.
And there was nothing that I didn't like about it, but it just wasn't clicking in for me.
Yeah.
And I watched it, I think, until the grandpa, Sam Neill's character, broke his leg in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was kind of like, I don't know. It's just still not doing it for me. And,
all right.
And I don't know why, but it didn't. Now you say that it's it's this close to a Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah.
Which in my book is not a compliment, and in fact could be a reason to stay away. I know I'm in the minority on that, so I've nearly lost the friendship of one of my brother-in-laws because I went off so hard on Wes Anderson.
I like Wes Anderson.
Yeah, so I used to like him. Now he's a art house Tim Burton, as far as I'm concerned.
I disagree with that statement.
But all right,
I don't think I love this one like What We Do in the Shadows. But I think this one's a really good movie. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. I agree. I should watch it because my wife finished it and she loved it.
Yeah. Well, your wife, besides marrying you, has excellent taste.
That's right. That's a big blot on her record, no doubt. Now, isn't this the guy that's directing the new Thor movie?
I think that is correct.
Wow.
Let me look that up for
you.
you.
While you look that up, I'm going to talk about my third favorite Bostonian.
You are correct.
Crime lord.
He is directing Thor.
Good. Okay. Mark Wahlberg came out with a new movie this last week called Patriots Day, and guess what that's about?
It's also directed by Peter Berg, right?
That's right.
So this is their thing now. They are adapting true stories of heroism.
Pretty much, because like 4 months ago, they came out with Deepwater Horizon.
It's like I couldn't even remember the name of it. These names are so generic.
That's right.
Deepwater Horizon, Patriots Day.
Well, that's the thing. What does everybody remember about the Deepwater Horizon? Oh, it's, BP's oil spill. What was the name of the ship? Or what was the name of the drilling rig? Deepwater Horizon. What's the name of the movie? Deepwater Horizon. There was a bombing. What was it called? Patriots Day bombing. What are we going to call the movie? Patriots Day. Anyway. I can't wait for their Vietnam War movie called
Vietnam War movie.
Called Vietnam. Boy, have you seen World War II? Peter Berg's new movie? It's great. Guess who it stars? Donnie Wahlberg, reprising his role from Band of Brothers, and Mark Wahlberg, because it's a requirement now. Anyway, sorry.
Because it's the law. How is Patriots Day?
Well, I'm gonna have a similar thought to this as I do with Hidden Figures coming up, which is if you've seen the preview or previous movies from Mark Wahlberg, you know exactly what you're getting. This is essentially Mark Wahlberg's cop character from The Departed, chasing down the Patriot Day bombers. And it is actually really good. And it from what I understand it really does dig into how this actually happened, how the kind of the character of Boston and the certain quirks of Boston help them find the bad guys, help them weed out false suspects and go to real suspects. And it's good, but if you know the story of the Patriot Day bombing and the capture of the Tsarnaev brothers, you know exactly, where this movie begins, where it ends, the beats in between. It's done very well. There's a lot of good emotion in it, but there are absolutely zero surprises.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So Mark Wahlberg is playing, I believe, like a composite character. Someone who's not someone who is an actual living human being. He's like a composite of a bunch of different characters. Do they involve him in like every single aspect of everything in the hunt? Like where you're like, oh, come on. Like the beat cop wouldn't really be in on that meeting.
They did. Well, what's interesting is from the previews, it looks like he's a beat cop. I believe he's essentially a composite of two characters, mainly to have him at the beginning of the story and at the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually kind of a high up detective, or in this story, he was kind of a well-established homicide detective that pissed off the wrong people, so he had to work as a beat cop for a while. But this was like his last day of being out in the cold, and after he was a beat cop of the Patriot Day Marathon, he was going to kind of get let out of the doghouse, and he was going to get back to where he wanted to go. So it's got this interesting thing where it's Mark Wahlberg as the frustrated cop because he's still kind of got a lowly status while the FBI and everything are making decisions around him, and he's got this reputation for being kind of a hothead and saying the wrong thing to the wrong people in power.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good. It's good, but it's not great. And what's interesting is now that I'm looking at this. Oh wait, hold on. So hold on. So we might use this for a segue to Hidden Figures because on IMDb, under the audience score, Patriots Day is getting a 7.9. And it said people also liked Hidden Figures. So if you click on Hidden Figures is getting a 7.9.
There you go.
So, yeah, I would say Patriots Day is a solid 7. And I guess I will start out our Hidden Figures section by saying I would give Hidden Figures a solid 7.
I liked it a little bit more than you then.
Because if you watch the preview to Hidden Figures, a story of African-American women working in the space program in the 60s, what you see in the preview and what you would kind of expect from hearing the one-line description of that story is exactly what this movie is. But Sonia Mansfield, tell me where I'm wrong.
I really like this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story I've never heard before. I think, we've all heard stories about the space program, countless books, movies, TV shows. I've never heard this story. Maybe you have.
Mm-mm.
So it's a good story to me. I think this movie is not as showy as something as La La Land, and it's not really doing anything different than in storytelling, like something like Moonlight. It's not doing anything really innovative. It starts at the beginning, it ends at the end, but it's a great story told well.
Right.
With really good performances. I just really liked the movie, and I thought everybody who's in it is really great. It's, Tara P. Henson, Octavia Spencer, Janelle Monáe, and even Kevin Costner. Marsala Ali is in this, and that guy, I was like, what a year he's had. He was in Luke Cage. He was in Moonlight. And now this?
What do you mean even Kevin Costner?
Oh, I love Kevin Costner. I don't really mean that. I like Kevin Costner. I am a defender of Kevin Costner.
Right. Actually, the reason I'm saying that is because probably 48 hours ago, I sat down, I turned on the TV, and one of my favorite movies, Open Range, was on.
I thought you were going to say Waterworld.
That's Right. Anyway.
The postman was on.
It's just, you know what? I am a defender of the postman. But anyway, you know what? Let's not get sidetracked. So,
I really
Hidden
like
Figures.
this movie. I like that, I think it's like we were talking a couple months ago about Sully.
Mm-hmm.
And it has this, what is a really good story, but it didn't tell it the way I wanted to be told. And it was trying to be like, look how clever we are with how we're telling the story. And they like broke it up these different ways, and they, showed the ending first and all these things. And I like that this one is just like, here's a good story.
Right.
With interesting characters that you care about.
Yeah.
And it doesn't try to do anything flashy.
Yeah.
And I'm cool with that.
Yeah. It's funny. I almost hope that more biographies did this kind of treatment. Hidden Figures is one of those things. It's kind of like, this is going to sound, I don't know if it's going to sound like damning with faint praise. It's kind of like Frasier or Everyone Loves Raymond, where they're doing absolutely nothing new. But what they're doing is done so well on such a high level that it's just really fun and really interesting and absorbing to watch. This Hidden Figures is a movie that could have come out in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s and been essentially the same movie in terms of tone, in terms of presentation, in terms of technique, all of those things. This is a very retro movie in a lot of ways, but it's so good. And, a lot of, I think, and it's kind of a biopic of these three women that have kind of made their way through NASA, but it just says, we're only going to pay attention to their time at NASA. We're not going to tell this huge backstory about how they grew up and what they had to deal with.
Right.
There are a couple really interesting ways that they communicated the oppression that African-American women went through at that time without just banging you over the head with it. Mm-hmm. But in a weird way that made it more, or for me, I'll admit, it made it more relatable. Like you could see yourself more in that. It wasn't like you're being preached at. It was just kind of like, hey, let's watch what they have to deal with and imagine yourself having to deal with this.
Yeah.
And, 20 minutes in, your heart is with them every single step.
Yeah.
It's just,
I love there's this thing later in the movie where John Glenn asks them to have Tara P. Henson's character check the numbers.
Right.
And it's so fun because it's like, he says, have the girl check the numbers. And if she's okay with them, I'm okay with them. And it's so funny because it's this moment where you're like, yeah, because he's like, it's just, it kind of gives her like a little validation, but he still refers to her as a girl.
Yeah.
So it's like this little thing that's like, it's like a little validation, but it's still like, but he still called her a girl, and it's like just this little thing. And there's some other things in the movie that I just really love. Like, I think a lesser movie would have been like, let's have a moment with Catherine, that's Tara P. Henson's character. Let's have a moment where she goes home and her kids are like, you're never spending time with me. I feel neglected. Or,
right.
Or her man gets mad, like, why are you neglecting me? That's like, there's none of those like less, like, I think a lesser movie would have gone there, and this movie doesn't go there.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. This movie focuses on what you want it to focus on. And there is a great moment. It's funny. There's a great moment where so they work in Virginia, Langley. I believe it's Langley, Virginia, and there's the kind of the white section of this division that they work in for NASA. They're called computers, but that used to not be a machine name. It used to be a job designation, which is somebody that computed numbers. Right. And, if you called someone a computer, that wasn't an insult. That's their job. Like now we say accountant or whatever. Anyway, and they're all lined up, and the Mercury 7 are going to come and visit them. And you can see the kind of white officials shuttling the Mercury astronauts kind of by the white section. And then it's kind of like, we're out of time. We're going to go. But John Glenn And this is such a great way to kind of introduce his character. It's like, well, all we really know before we watch this movie is John Glenn, astronaut, American hero, and he kind of insists, no, I want to meet everybody. So he goes through the African American section, the colored section that they called it, and introduces himself and talks to them and finds out what they do. And it's like, oh, and it's just such a sweet little, moment. And it's kind of like this is what America should be. This is, seeing him buck the system and bring them all together as one team to go into space is just, it's just so good. And then watching them, another thing that's interesting that I thought that was very prescient, maybe even more today than it was at the time, was Octavia Spencer's character, where she's kind of like a middle manager. Mm-hmm. And she's seeing them install this computer, this huge IBM computer that's essentially going to destroy all their jobs. And she figures out first, I need to know what's going on with that, because that's the future. And if I want to be in the future, I got to figure it out. So she teaches herself Fortran, and then she starts teaching her staff Fortran. Mm-hmm. So they're more advanced, so they're able to go into the computer section when the kind of complacent, white computer department isn't really paying attention. They're fine with their privilege. They're fine with everything. And then when the jobs start getting cut because the new computer's doing all the work, Octavia Spencer's got it covered. And it's just it's a little peek into essentially our current day, which is you better have your eye 10 years down the future and see what's coming, and you better train yourself for it. Otherwise, you're going to get snowed.
And I love that this movie's about smart women.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're not like, well, they're smart at work, but they're stupid in life, or, that sort of thing. Like they're smart.
Yeah.
They're smart women. They have families, and their families love them, and they're good to their families. And they're really, it's just such a well-made movie. And you really care about those women.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the other thing that I really like about this movie. It was directed by Theodore Melfi from his screenplay with Alison Schroeder. Is a lesser movie would kind of have a lot of we're gonna make a speech moment. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not gonna be like this in the future or whatever. But there's no real big speech moments. There's two kind of speech moments.
Yeah.
Where Janelle Monáe needs to go to an all-white school to get some classes, and she gives a speech to the judge. And then there's a moment where Tariq P. Henson kind of, I wouldn't say has a breakdown, but kind of reaches her breaking point, and then basically tells her boss and everyone in the room what's what.
Yeah. And then it's followed with like Costner like breaking down the colored bathroom sign, which is.
But what's interesting is both of those moments are really earned. It's not like, oh, we gotta give our actors or our characters their big Oscar moment.
Right.
It's these characters at this point, after what they've been through, would probably break, and they would probably break in this way. She's very put together. She's very articulate. But, everybody has their breaking point. So when she breaks down, she's going to be articulate and put together and smart. And it's really good.
Yeah.
I
would give this movie an 8.
Yeah, I would. Well, you know what? I might give it an 8. I need to see it again. I might agree with you. So,
those are all the things on my list. So what else is on your list?
All right. So Fences, starring Denzel Washington, directed by Denzel Washington and Viola Davis, from August Wilson's play. Good movie. I wish they made more of these movies. I don't know why studios, especially in the day and age of, pre-existing awareness of stuff, don't just grab plays off the shelf and just blast through them all. And, they're a pretty good Oscar baity type of thing.
Right.
So Fences is really good. Just kind of a downtrodden African-American father bringing up his son. And it's what it conveys about the kind of that African-American experience is that awful moment where things started to change, baseball started to get integrated, the civil rights movement was starting to make strides, but there was a generation of African Americans that had lived under the oppression, and they were not young enough to see the fruits of the struggle. So they basically got to see the world go on a path towards a better future, and they were just born too early, and watching that kind of crush this guy is heartbreaking. It's a good movie, and it's interesting, and it's, obviously well written. I believe Denzel Washington was talking about bringing all of August Wilson's, I think they're 10 plays, and I can't remember what they're called, probably a decalogue, but I'm not sure, to the big screen. If that's the case, I'm super excited for it because, yeah, and then he should move on to Arthur Miller.
Yeah. Fences is definitely on my list.
Yeah. So the next two things I was going to talk about, and then we'll wrap this up, but I think we might be talking about this near future, is Taboo with Thomas Hardy on FX. It's about the son of a kind of a shipping magnate in the early 1800s coming back to London after being lost in Africa. And The Young Pope on HBO, which premiered tonight, starring Jude Law as, guess what?
An old pope.
That's right. Nope. He's
a middle-aged pope.
Nope. Close.
A baby pope.
Nope. One more try.
A young pope?
An old rabbi. No. Yes.
A teenage pope.
That's right. It's a young pope.
I was a teenage pope.
That's right. And both of them, I think, this could be me or it could be them. I think I'm hitting the limit of what I'm gonna call it now, and I think we're gonna have a segment here in the next couple of weeks about this. The Heisenbergization. Let's call it the Heisenberg syndrome of modern prestige television, where it's awful guys or really unlikable anti-heroes being quote-unquote badass and, having power or clawing for power or whatever. They're all... I have a suspicion that if Taboo came out 15 years ago or The Young Pope came out 15 years ago, it would be like, holy smokes, this is a revelation of television. But now, I've seen it enough. Taboo is so dark and dreary and aggressively dour.
I have to say, I just don't have the mindset for that sort of thing anymore.
Yeah, I think I'm reaching it. It's funny because I remember back when The Sopranos first came on, there was all these happy, plucky, up, network noted to death dramas on network television, and then The Sopranos came on, and it's like, hey, this is what an adult television show should be like. Here it is, folks. The culmination of 50 years of television has been injected into this, and this is how you do television right. And it kicked off this entire age of television that we're living in. But I think, you know what it is? I think Taboo and The Young Pope are kind of like the 25th or 50th fantasy novels that came out after Lord of the Rings. This is and I'm probably going to make waves when I say this, this is the Terry Brooks Sword of Shannara series, which is, it rips off a lot from the master. It walks over exactly the same ground as the original thing that was cooler, but it's got a lot of the tropes that you like, so look at what I'm doing here. I don't know. It could just be that I'm tired of this thing and I'm looking for something else. It's funny because I'm listening to David Bianculli's The Platinum Age of Television, and he defines the beginning of the Platinum Age of Television as 99, when The Sopranos and The West Wing came out.
Oh, okay.
And The West Wing, I was watching a little bit recently, and that's a show from another era. That's actually somewhat hopeful, somewhat up, somewhat, it's adult, but it's not just like, I mean, man, can you imagine if The West Wing was out now?
Here's the thing.
What
I
they would do.
think we're going to start seeing that.
I hope so.
I think because the real world is a super bummer right now, that we're going to start seeing things like The West Wing, things that are a little bit more hopeful. I think that's why, I mean, things like Young Pope and Taboo, I don't know what the ratings are. I didn't pay attention, but I would imagine that I don't think these shows are going to click with people.
You could be right.
I think people are going to be like just burned out on this sort of thing.
I think you might be right, because I think Young Pope, I believe, is already I think it's done with the BBC, Canal Plus, HBO. I think they're all kind of combining their forces to make this, and it's just they've already renewed it for season 2, and I'm just I don't care. I don't.
You're probably just going to start seeing like an increase in ratings for, those like stupid game shows they're doing, and where people just want to tune in and drop out.
Well, that's I fear you're right, and I'm a little bummed.
Like, remember Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? It was on like every night of the week.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, is I think, and that's what bums me out, is because I think you can do a show that doesn't insult people's intelligences and that is good and meaningful to watch, that doesn't have to have a dour, down anti-hero at the center.
It's getting lazy is what it is.
Right. If you look at The Sopranos as kind of the perfection of network television drama, I'm looking for this generation of Cheers or whatever, where you take everything that's great about sitcoms or comedy on television and do a new kind of thing, or not even necessarily comedy, but just like, well, you know what? Hold on. Now that I'm saying all this, This Is Us might be that new show. Now that I think about it, and I've heard about it. Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe we should watch it and talk about it.
Yes, but last, there might be a ray of sunshine that we were going to talk about in weeks to come, which is, I watched the first 10 minutes of Lemony Snicket, Series of Unfortunate Events, and that might be the show that I'm hoping for. But we're going to talk about that, unless you have anything you'd like to say right now, next week.
No, I'm going to save it for next week.
All right.
Let's get on to topic 2.
Topic 2.
Topic 2, You're Dead to Me. We try to keep things positive here on Dorking Out, but sometimes we get a little nasty. This is our returning segment, You're Dead to Me, where we get to share some of the stories in pop culture that we downright hate. And I'm going to go first because I am a lady.
Do it.
And ladies first.
All right.
I don't like breakfast at Tiffany's. There. I said it. I don't like breakfast at Tiffany's. And I know that there are people out there that will hate me for this, but I think it is not very good. I think Audrey Hepburn looks amazing in it, and Moon River is a very catchy song, but the movie is not great. And I don't know why people think it is great. First of all, Mickey Rooney is in it, and he plays an Asian man.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Who thought that was a good idea?
The casting director, apparently.
It's hilariously offensive. And Audrey Hepburn's character, Holly, is a quirky, annoying twit. Perhaps she is the basis. I think she might be like the basis for what we now would call like the manic pixie dream girl.
Right.
I'm a quirky, annoying twit, but somewhere out there, some man will love me for my quirky, annoying twittiness. She's stupid. She's really annoying. If I knew her in real life, I wouldn't want to know her. I would unfriend her on Facebook.
So what's the thing that sets this off from all other movies. What's the thing that sets you off about this movie? Just,
You know what I think?
Is there a moment?
I think it's because it's held up. It was explained to me like it's a classic. Like I should love this movie.
Right.
Like it's beloved. People love Breakfast at Tiffany's. And then I saw it and I was like, no, it's an idiot. She's an idiot. She's really annoying. She's really weird. So she's got like a neighbor. Have you seen Breakfast at Tiffany's?
I have. I've seen it a long time ago.
Okay, so she's got a neighbor who's like the guy from the A-Team, George Papard.
George Papard.
Yeah.
This is actually an A-Team prequel.
Yeah. He plays like her hunky neighbor or whatever.
Right.
And she's like, you look like my brother Fred. Can I call you Fred? And then she like crawls into bed with him and like calls him Fred throughout the movie, even though she's romantically involved with him. It's kind of gross.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so I guess I don't get, like, why do people love it so much? Is it because she's so beautiful in it? I mean, her look in that movie is so iconic.
Right.
Like, you know, the dress, the pearls, the hair, like, you know, all of it. But like, it's just so stupid. I just don't get it. Like, I understand that like not all movie characters have to be likable.
Right.
You know, but like you should be at least be able to like relate or connect or something. And I just found her so incredibly obnoxious.
Yeah, you know, I'm wondering, I think this might be, I almost might want to put this up there with kind of like James Bond movies, or Sean Connery James Bond movies, where there was something that was important about it to the culture of the time, but culture has moved so far from where this is that the things that used to be charming or witty or interesting now are bizarre and grating and
maybe
gross. Because it's directed by Blake Edwards, who for a long run in Hollywood was a pretty respected comedy director. It was written by Truman Capote.
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, it's based on a book by Truman Capote. Written by George Axelrod, who also wrote The 7-Year Itch, the original Manchurian Candidate. So, I know that, like, I know it's got a good pedigree. I just don't understand why people like this movie. And what's fun, I wrote about this movie on my blog back in 2010. Right.
I wrote a blog post, and I believe the blog post is actually titled Breakfast at Tiffany's is Stupid. And here's the thing. It is one of my most popular blog posts because people will Google Breakfast at Tiffany's sucks or Breakfast at Tiffany's is stupid, and they will get on my blog, and then people will comment, I don't get it. I'm so glad I'm not alone. This movie is stupid.
Yeah.
And most recently, I got a comment from one of my readers named Christy. I have never met Christy. And she said, I just watched this movie for the first time, and I have no idea why anyone likes it. I thought I was the only one, to be quite honest. It was a struggle for me to even finish it. It is quite possibly the most boring movie I have ever watched, and I am glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, it's interesting. When I was listening to, I'm thinking about the concept of how time changes works of art. And, you know, like I mentioned in the previous segment, I'm listening to David Bianculli's The Platinum Age Television, and he talks about showing The Graduate to his class and how it was a very important, very timely, very forward-leaning, really respected comedy, and very supposed to be very romantic and whatever. And when I was kind of getting into movies in the 80s, it had that reputation of, The Graduate's one of the great, so you go watch it, and there's a lot to like about it. But he said one of his students said, "Oh no, this movie's awful. This is weird." and he's kind of like, "All right, well, why would you say that?" Well, Benjamin has sex with this woman. Then he starts obsessing about her daughter. Then he tracks the daughter down to where she's going to college and drives there in hopes of meeting her. They have a romance that doesn't work out. Then she's marrying some other dude, and he shows up at the wedding and butts the whole thing up.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's the thing where they talk about like the behavior you do in romantic comedies would get you arrested in real life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, like John Cusack, like holding the boombox outside, like she would call the police on him. You know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I know. I hear what you're saying, but she would have to be pretty high strung to call the police.
No,
on
I
John
know,
Cusack.
but you know what I mean. Like
I do know what you mean.
This sort of behavior that we let slide in the movies if you do it in real life.
That's true. But yeah, so, and I'm wondering.
Hey, maybe our listeners would love to comment and tell me, like, what am I missing about Breakfast at Tiffany's? Like, what am I not getting?
I don't think you're missing anything. I think it's one of those movies that was important for its time. And I think I watched it back in the late 80s or 90s. And I was kind of like, okay, I see what people might have liked, but I'm not on board. It didn't cast its magic spell, which is interesting because you take a movie like Casablanca. I showed that to my 13-year-old, and he locked onto that movie like crazy. You know,
Casablanca's one of my favorite movies.
Exactly. And that's what's so interesting is there's some movies that time doesn't touch, and there are other movies. Actually, here's an interesting thing. There are other movies like Breakfast at Tiffany's, and I was thinking about this the other day. Animal House has not aged well.
No, it hasn't.
And it's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah, 16 Candles is another one that has not aged well.
Yeah. There are parts you have to look past with 16 Candles, but I still like a lot of it. Animal House, it's like you have to look past most of it to pull out the stuff that you like. So, yeah, it's heartbreaking, but
what is your dead to me?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. This shows. I've talked about this concept before, but now I'm just gonna flat out say it. The Die Hard series is dead to me, and I need a word for this, where the balance of like a series comes out, and once you get more than 50% of the series sucking, something happens to it, or at least in my mind, where it kind of vanishes. The Alien series is probably going to pop up again on this in this segment sometime in the future, because it's kind of the first Die Hard is a legit classic, one of the top 5 greatest action movies ever made, and it is still amazing to watch that movie, and it's just hits you like a ton of bricks.
My niece is obsessed with Die Hard, the first Die Hard. Like she still loves it, Lorelai.
Oh yeah, no, it is fantastic. It is amazing. And I watched it, and I've done this with my boys. Like I showed them like the original Poltergeist, and they were like, oh, okay, whatever. And then I showed them the original Die Hard, and it was like when it ended, it was like a revelation. Like that movie still performs like it did, and it hit the movie world like a thunderbolt. It changed action movies for the next 15 years. But the problem is they kept making them. And A Good Day, by the time they got to the last one, A Good Day to Die Hard.
So ridiculous.
So ridiculous. But here's the thing, and I think I've said this to you. I'm not sure I've said this on the air, but I'm going to. A Good Day, imagine you wrote a script for a Star Wars parody that you wanted to really run down Star Wars and pull apart every little bit and make it look ridiculous and dumb and horrible and wreck the characters. Imagine you hated the character of Han Solo and you just wanted to wreck it. But then...
I don't want to think about that.
Yeah, but then, so you write the script, and lo and behold, Harrison Ford signs on, and Carrie Fisher signs on, and Mark Hamill signs on, and all the people that were in the original thing you're trying to destroy sign on, and they're in your parody script. That's what A Good Day to Die Hard is.
I have to say, I haven't seen that one. I think I got as far as Die Hard with a Vengeance. And
yeah,
by then I was totally over it. But also one of the things that's so great about the first Die Hard movie is he's just a man.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's not an action hero. He's not a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
He's a man.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by that point, like, now he's an action star.
Right.
Like, he's just he's like an 80s action star character. He's not a man anymore.
Exactly.
And that's why I was like, I'm done then. I'm over it. So,
well, here's the thing. In the first one, he's a cop who's trying to win back his wife. He comes to Los Angeles. He's a New York cop, and he has this weird. He just happens to be there when these terrorists show up, and he has this amazing adventure. Die Hard 2, he's still pretty much that character, and it's almost like a kind of, he happens to be in a place where there's thousands of people, and this weird thing happens. Not that great. A lot of people don't like Die Hard 2. I actually kind of like it, but okay. Die Hard 3 with a vengeance is, one, you got Samuel L. Jackson in it, so that's fun to watch. 2, the entire plot wraps around who he is and connects to the first Die Hard, but also connects to the fact that it happens in New York. It's a different thing. They're still trying to do new stuff. And then Live Free or Die Hard, which was the fourth one, was just
another stupid name.
Another stupid name. And then but it looks like a classic compared to A Good Day to Die Hard, because A Good Day to Die Hard is just, here's the other thing, is yes, you are completely correct. They forget every aspect of what makes the first one great, and Bruce Willis turns into a ridiculous cardboard character of an 80s action star. But he also turns into an asshole. A total asshole. And he's just like, there's a moment he goes to Moscow to help his son, played by Jai Courtney, which should tell you, with a man with that low a Freddie Prinze Jr. score as the son of the thing, Bruce Willis doesn't want anyone shining around him. And there was like some moment where they're both murdering a bunch of terrorists or shooting a bunch of terrorists, and said something like, "Oh," and they make some reference back to him, what kind of father he was, and we didn't have any hugging in our household, and damn right we didn't have any hugging, and it was just like, God, what a monster! Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like it's supposed.
We didn't have a relationship.
Yes, that's it. It's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be like, oh, look at that, this kind of like cowboy moment, but it's just like, I really don't like what this is communicating about the psychodynamics in the John McClane household.
Right.
It's just blah. So what we do have to look forward to is A Good Day to Die Hard was directed by John Moore, who also directed Behind Enemy Lines, the Max Payne movie, the remake of The Omen, and apparently he is developing another sequel. I think it's called Die Hard Year One.
Oh, geez.
Where they have a story that happens in the 70s that tells about the first year of John McClane's police career, but then also tells the story later. I hope it doesn't happen.
Why don't they just do a TV series?
I don't know.
That's a great idea. And like every week he gets like trapped in a plane or a building or a farm or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
I would totally watch that. No, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I would not watch that.
No, it's awful. It's awful. So that's
a good pick.
The Die Hard series is dead to me. If they make another one, I'm not going to see it. So rest in peace.
That's what you keep saying about Transformer movies.
Oh God. Oh, wow. You were so quick, because as soon as I said that, I thought, should I mention the Transformers movies thing, or should I've beat myself up enough about it on the show. You know what? I'm not going to mention the Transformers thing. And then a millisecond later, out of Sonia Mansfield's mouth, thank you for my illustrious co-host who is on it. Yeah.
And on that note, let's go on to favorite headlines.
So that just brings us to our favorite headlines of the week. And this week, there's a lot of headlines. We have a lot of choices here. Sonia Mansfield, why don't
Yes.
you go first and talk about what you want to talk about?
Okay, well, my picks go together, which are the Producers Guild and the Directors Guild announced their nominees for directing and producing movies.
Is that what
And
they
of
did?
course, yes. And because I care about this stuff because we take our Oscar picks very seriously.
That's
so
right.
I need to know, what's going to make the cut. So, and these are the ones that these are like the closest indicators to not only like what's going to be nominated, but usually the things that win these win the Oscars. So
Right.
Producers Guild, I mean, really everything here, you're like, these are probably what you're going to see for Best Picture.
Yeah, let me hear.
Arrival, Deadpool, which is a huge, big deal that our Deadpool is on this list. Fences, Hacksaw Ridge, Hell or High Water, Hidden Figures, La La Land, Lion, Manchester by the Sea, and Moonlight. I've seen quite a few of these.
I cannot tell you
But
how irritating.
I think it's
keep going.
I just think it's really awesome that Deadpool is on this list.
That is cool, but I cannot tell you how irritated I will be if Deadpool gets a Best Picture nomination and The Dark Knight didn't. The greatest comic book movie ever made, one of the greatest movies ever made.
Didn't they? That's what the following year they expanded it to like 10.
Yes, they did.
So okay.
Which should have been 10. See, that's the thing is all these people saying, there's too many nominations, blah blah. They had 10 nominations back in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
10 nominations is the original. That's how they should do it. That's how they should have been doing it. And Dark Knight would have won Best Picture if it weren't for these meddling kids.
So then, get off my lawn, kids. And then for the Directors Guild, it's La La Land, Lion, Moonlight, Manchester by the Sea, and Arrival. And they also do like first time feature film. And I think this is really cool. So Lion's nominated, but also Edge of 17, a movie I know you liked a lot.
Yeah.
Deadpool is also nominated. Birth of a Nation and 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Okay. See,
And there's a lot of stuff here for TV too, but I'm focused on the movie stuff.
Yeah. I feel like I want to see Birth of a Nation. We've kind of gone back and forth about it. We talked about, how to deal with a creator with a troublesome past.
Right.
And I feel
you saw Hacksaw Ridge, so why not?
One, I saw Hacksaw Ridge, and two, I think it's weird. And actually, you know what? That's a fantastic parallel.
Well, this is someone who has actually was he acquitted or was he even charged? I forget, to be honest.
I believe he was charged and acquitted.
So it's like you can't even be found not guilty of something.
Right.
And
that's the thing is, okay, he's and we talk about Oscars so white and we talk about the racial politics in Hollywood and everything is, so a black man that gets accused of something, he's innocent, but too bad, we're going to destroy your, because in the middle, the first half of 2016, Birth of a Nation was the movie. That was supposed to be the one that was going to charge its way all the way to the Oscars. And let's be honest, the movie itself has not changed.
Right.
If it's good or if it's not good, the movie itself has not changed at all. It's the director and writer's reputation has changed, and all of a sudden, it's not as good as everyone was saying it was, which is just, I think it's gross. I think it's, I don't know the ins and outs of his history. I don't know the ins and outs of what happened. Maybe he's not a great guy. Probably has some troublesome past, but two, that was 20 years ago. And do we really want to be in a position where if an African American gets accused of something, they're out for life? When we let Mel Gibson back in, and what Mel Gibson did, between supposed domestic violence, the stuff that he ranted about, supposed racism, anti-Semitism, all this stuff, he gets a pass back in, but this young filmmaker who is acquitted and made a great film, nope, you're out. I just think it's gross.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What are your favorite headlines?
I'm going to be completely frivolous. I am going to
Okay.
go to Tom Hardy gave an interesting interview to the Daily Beast where he talks about Mad Max sequels, which I'm very excited about. Talks about James Bond, and he talks about the ridiculous amount of young talent that was in Band of Brothers. Anyway, so that was his first paid gig in acting, was being in Band of Brothers. He's has like one line, I think. So he talks about he's giving a description of also Jimmy Fallon. I keep forgetting. And now it sits out like a sore thumb. If you're ever watching Band of Brothers, all of a sudden the host of the Tonight Show rolls up in a Jeep and starts giving people ammo.
And he starts singing and dancing. And...
That's right. And then he gets picked off by a German sniper, and everybody cheers. No, that's not true. So there were a couple things that he's talking about. So Tom Hardy has worked with Christopher Nolan for a while. He's coming out he's in Dunkirk, which is coming out later this year. And when asked, "Do you want to play Bond?" I tend to see your name on a lot of wish lists. And you've worked a lot with Christopher Nolan, and Christopher Nolan is famous for being desperate, really wanting to direct a James Bond movie. And Tom Hardy said, there's a saying amongst the fraternity of acting and in the fellowship of my peer group that if you talk about it, you're automatically out of the race. That is being James Bond. So I can't possibly comment on that one. If I mention it, it's gone. But Chris Nolan, what a fantastic director for a Bond movie, which I totally agree. He also said that he signed for 3 Road Warrior movies, and he's essentially waiting for a call.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I'm really interested in that I frankly can't believe. Everybody pour yourself a tall one because you're going to have to drink here in a second. So he was asked, is the Al Capone film Fonzo actually happening with you playing Capone? Yes, it's not Cicero. The one thing I'd initially signed on to do. It's a completely separate piece that I'm very excited by, with Josh Trank set to direct.
Oh.
So the director of Fantastic Four has reemerged.
Here we go.
And apparently he's directing an Al Capone movie starring Tom Hardy, which, holy smokes. We'll see if that works out. But yeah, I would love to see Tom Hardy play Al Capone in a movie not directed by Josh Trank. But apparently beggars can't be choosers, and that's on the way. So that's it. And we're gonna have a couple more links in our show notes for with all these, because there were this was kind of a big news week. Oh, also, supposedly, we'll just tease this because there's very little to actually report. You'll have to check the show notes. Potential Game of Thrones spinoff. You know what? I'm not going to tease it. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
So the head of HBO
What do you think about that?
I think it could be good. Let me find out who said this. Blois. HBO president of programming, Casey Blois, said recently at the TCAs, all I can say is that we're exploring it being a Game of Thrones spinoff. We don't have any scripts. We're not even close to saying, oh yeah, let's do this. But it's a big enough property that we would be foolish not to explore it. It's a very rich world. We'd be foolish not to look into it. I think that's a great idea. I think that's exactly the kind of, I don't want to see a story of, young Eddard Stark. I don't want to see a story of young Robert Baratheon. I don't want to see a story of younger Daenerys or whatever, where she's just in exile for the whole show. I want to see 500 years before this or 200 years after this. I want to see something completely different. And that is one of the great things, I'll say it, about these big corporations owning these big intellectual properties like Star Wars or Marvel or whatever is. They can dive deeply into these fictional worlds and come out with a lot of interesting stories that I think.
I have to say, I wouldn't mind a prequel, actually.
No.
I might be into it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is there's a lot of stuff that is mentioned in the history of Westeros that would be very cool. You know,
Yeah.
it's a little bit like Obi-Wan Kenobi talking about the Clone Wars in the original Star Wars.
Right.
It's like, ooh, I want to hear about that story. You know, it's four lines that could, sustain an entire series. If done correctly, he said, thinking of the prequels. Or, I keep hearing from friend of the show, Scott Daigle, Star Wars Clone Wars, gotta watch it. So
Yeah.
I would like to. Don't you take that tone with my friend Scott, with your friend Scott, because he's going to be on the show, and he will get us. We'll be in trouble.
Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble.
That's right. So, Sonia Mansfield.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we end the show?
No, I'll just say goodbye.
Goodbye! The Dorking Out Show is on Twitter at Dorking Out Show, where you can find Chris at Jet Jurgens and Sonia at The Sonia Show. You can read about Sonia's random adventures at thesoniashow.com and track the slow and creeping progress of Chris's novel and his other hijinks at jetjurgens.com. You can find out more about The Dorking Out Show at dorkingoutshow.com. While you're over there, you can support us by giving us a review on iTunes. We have a handy-dandy iTunes link to whisk you right back to 2007, where you can leave your review and 5-star rating in iTunes. We'd do it for your podcast. Want to dork out even more? Well, you can sign up for our newsletter, where you'll get all the headlines we use as fuel for the show. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. This has been a production of RocketSpots.tv.